Roping can put a lot of duress on the rotator cuff and the shoulder structures because of the repetitive nature of the activity. It's important to keep the muscles and the support structures strong around our shoulder, but sometimes the tendon attachments just take the brunt and we need a little push toward healing. That's right where we come in.
I'm going to tell you about a patient of ours we'll call Jim. Jim is a 5th generation rancher. He's grown up since he was a young kid working on the ranch, fixing fence, tamping posts, shoveling snow, saddling horses, everything that comes along with the day-to-day grind of keeping a ranch going. The ranch is Jim's livelihood. There are no days off, there are no sick days. When Jim's in pain or has a sniffle or doesn't feel like ranching that day, he's still out there ranching. Jim has had pain in his shoulder that's been persisting for quite some time. He's tried to ignore it. He's taken Advils, he's taken Aleve, he's tried to put the pain in the back of his mind and just keep on going. In addition to Jim's busy day-to-day life running his ranch, he also loves team roping. And a couple nights a week, Jim goes and practices roping and occasionally likes to enter a competition and compete. Jim went out on his usual practice night and someone rode in on a mule and his horse didn't like it. And next thing Jim knew, he was bucked off on the ground on his bad shoulder. This just compounded the pain that Jim had already been having with his shoulder, and now he was forced to have to address the issue. He asked his neighbor who he saw about his shoulder pain, and he told him the name of his doctor in town. So Jim got on the phone, waited on hold, finally got an appointment with his doctor, and went to see him 3 weeks later. During this 3-week time, Jim was still out there working, guarding his arm. He was in a lot of pain. It made his day-to-day tasks a lot more difficult. He went to his doctor and his doctor told him he needed to get an MRI. He took the script from the doctor, went home, called the MRI facility, made an appointment for 2 weeks later, and went in and had his MRI done. Now, 2 weeks after that, Jim goes back to his doctor where he's told, Jim, your rotator cuff is completely torn. Your joint is severely arthritic. The only option you have is a total shoulder replacement. Jim left the doctor's office feeling extremely frustrated, upset, and it was really life-changing, very upsetting news. Not only did Jim have to call his partner and tell him that they had to draw out of the roping because his shoulder was in too bad of shape, he now had to figure out who would run his ranch for the next 6 to 8 months and who would take over his role at the ranch because he would be in a sling and extremely debilitated for a long time. Jim heard from a friend of his that came to Arizona with a similar condition and was treated by MSK Guide and decided to give a call. Jim called and I spoke to him, and after our visit, he decided he was going to give it a shot and come down to see us. We spent about an hour with Jim. The first part of our visit was visiting about what he does and checking his shoulder out clinically. Then we proceeded to look at Jim's shoulder using ultrasound technology and really see where the deficit was arising in real time, down to the fiber separation of the rotator cuff in motion. We had him swing the rope and we could see where the shortfall was coming from and actually follow it back on the ultrasound. Once we had our target, we proceeded with the injection and Jim left the office feeling a little less pain. Over the course of the next couple weeks, we had Jim take it easy as far as lifting any heavy grain buckets or putting his shoulder under any type of extreme duress. After the 2 weeks, Jim began to rope the dummy and feel his shoulder. He described it as feeling tight and secure, like an internal ace bandage. With a little bit more time, he began to pick up the pace, roping the dummy. He then got on his horse at about the 3rd week and was roping the sled. After 4 weeks, he began to resume his roping practice and called his partner and said, we're not drawing out of that roping. And they ended up winning that roping. He has continued to do amazingly well and has been able to avoid having that shoulder replaced. Jim's story is much like almost every shoulder patient that we see that comes in, and that most of these shoulders are dealing with the same type of things that are going on. Torn up rotator cuff tendons, bone on bone, sometimes a dislocated biceps tendon, and we felt it fitting to describe this shoulder as the Dakota shoulder.